Hello and a happy new year, 5917, March the 1st. It's amazing what little things that resonate, little sayings and things. So two that are sort of connected together in the last few days is Neville Goddard talks about God or the Creator at the limit of opacity in human form, in all of us. So that's one saying, the limit of opacity. So I'm thinking about what's its opposite. Well, that must be capacity. And I'm thinking in terms of energy and capacitors. Add on to that an analogy that Lana Labonte often uses on her videos, that is, we're just like monkeys chucking our shit at each other. So, to connect these two things together, this is sort of second part about Atlantis and the implications of that ever since, and I feel it is reflected very much in today's world. As I discussed on the last video, the layout with the concentric rings is pretty much replicated if you're a nomadic tribe with an encampment, and also town and city plans, how they radiate out from a centre. So what we've got, this is a video I was sent. It's basically a sort of like psychic connection, and the topic was the fall of Atlantis, and there's a few things in that sort of really stood out. Imagine a scene not unlike that game of Battleship where you're firing blind, as it were, and you're taking pot shots at something. It's described as being a comet, and sort of fireballs sort of landing at various areas. It is a bit like the sort of monkey flinging its shit, sort of indiscriminately until it gets its main target. And what came out of this thing for me was the destruction of Atlantis was over a 20-year period. And the pattern was these comet debris, or whatever you want to think they may be, was twice a year. So that would imply that we've got some sort of technology involved for something to come round at regular intervals over a 20-year period. So twice a year, that would give you 40 times. So 2040. Referencing probably the phoenix and possibly the reason why we have this calendrical system we have today. But also the relevance of this, it's probably your original conspiracy theorists, you could say, in Atlantis. Now that, imagine you've got these fireballs coming over and they're hitting various things, causing disruption, causing destruction. And then 6 months later it happens again, and then 6 months later it happens again. And by this time you may have a few people saying, well, hang on a minute, this has happened once, it's happened twice. How much more are we going to put up with? Is it going to keep coming round? And sure enough, by the looks of things, it did, until there was the direct hit on the actual centre of Atlantis. So I thought it was interesting that we're talking about 2040 with a phoenix year, and we're talking about something over a 20-year period that then happened twice a year, giving you 40 destruction events, as it were. until it destroyed the very centre of Atlantis, which would also then give you time for some of that population to then look for other, and migrate to other safer areas that are not in that sort of target range, as it were. So hence the cultural and spiritual and science centre ended up going to Era, the Aryans. In other words, what we call Ireland today. But look at the pattern you've got. You've got something that happens every year, and it's sort of boosted 6 months later, it's topped up, shall we say. I wonder what, in recent years, that may sort of allude to. I think you get the picture with that. So you've got this destruction of what probably was a harmonious civilization around the sort of known world of the time, because obviously the land masses have changed, as I've said in an earlier video, by collapsing the vapor canopy and increasing the sea levels. That's the first step to herding people, or the survivors, into smaller areas and easier to start controlling by grouping them. You've also got a topic that seems to be quite a big one across various channels. I listened last night to Old World Florida. It's 5 hours long, showing the connection between the Greeks and Florida. The Greeks, which is from the word creek. Now tying that in with the Makdari book, how with the rewrites and things, how you have this situation with the Greeks having their philosophies and things and admitting that they don't know where it came from. This is due to the sort of rewrites of history by a certain group, so misattributing things from one place to another, claiming martyrs, the very people that have stood in the way, and then reversing it so they would then appear to be martyrs on the side of the Roman Empire, or the Roman Catholic religion as it morphed into, and hiding behind various identities by bribery and enticement and getting others to do the dirty work, and then the fabrication of groups like the Angles and coming up with a concocted story of Anglo-Saxons. Because things really have been reversed, and if you haven't listened to that Makdari book, Irish Wisdom in the Bible and Pyramids, it certainly, it's like a missing sort of link in this whole story of the history. So you have this sort of destruction, and it becomes apparent after a few years that it's like, hey, this is regular. So you see this being played out today. Things like in Turkey, you always get these little videos that show and imply that these things are started by direct energy weapons. So the question would be, well, if the technology is there to do that, why isn't it happening more frequently? Why isn't this sort of control system of the world able to sort of do things on a far more regular basis, and living up to the stories that are being put out, particularly on social media, the gaslighting about the sort of artificial intelligence, how far advanced it is. I mean, if it was the case, well, where's the evidence of it? We don't really see it. It seems more fear stories of what is to come than what actually is. And of course, if you focus on it, you're feeding an energy to it. And I feel that also plays a huge part in this. The direct energy weapons may actually be reliant on two things. One, building up enough collected energy in which to operate these things. Because if these things do exist, you can be certain that they would be very closely guarded beyond the sort of your normal level of military secrets, far beyond that, because I don't feel that they are coming from outer space or aliens or anything like that. Rather, I think the terra is definitely within the terra firma and possibly below the terra firma. I mean, isn't it interesting how right throughout the history of humanity, every culture, every civilization is always about looking upwards to the sky for various things. But where is the same curiosity about the very thing that we are on and what is below the ground? The two things don't have the same funding, they don't have the same investigation, which I find very curious, because rather than looking out there, wouldn't it be more interesting to look at what's below our feet? But there doesn't seem to be this curiosity in the same way, certainly not from official parties involved that have the ability to investigate these things. There's just a few thoughts I thought I'd put together, set the scene for the how Atlantis was destroyed, how it has a sort of relevance today in the way it was carried out. So another part of this, there's a lot of fear about delivery agents and implanted nanotechnology. What if that is not quite as implied? What if that is some sort of enhancing technology to actually draw on human energy and sort of magnify it, which works as like an interaction with what would seem to be direct energy weapons that are hidden above the clouds, and there's some sort of interaction. Because this whole reality really does seem to be empowered by human energy, and where we focus our attention will feed an energy. This is very apparent with the inner work, and I have to come back to this because this is all anecdotal about the history, about the fall of Atlantis and the things that have happened since. It's just really to sort of make sense of events, the chronology of it. And I feel Jason, Archaic's channel, has shown beyond any doubt that there are regular patterns. There is a sort of regularity to all of these things, which would imply it's not natural, it's a machine-based, computer-based technology, shall we say, that is then played out, and then with the redactions, the rewritings, the editings of history, the misattributing characters, names, swapping things about. So things are implied to come from the East, from particularly the Middle East. But the pattern, the story actually looks to be the opposite way round. It's coming from the West. Now I could quite easily go into the etymology. I mentioned this on the last video, but I'm going to hold that over till part 3 because this is a very complex subject. We're already up to, what, 14 minutes. The video yesterday went to, or the day before, went to 24 minutes, and it was a lot longer than I originally intended, so I feel we'll stop there. But just to recap again, you've got the destruction of Atlantis over a 20-year period, with attacks twice a year, so 2 20s or 40s. You've got your 2040. Another thing that is often talked about is Agenda 2030, and the assumption is always made it's talking about the year 2030. But what if it was something that began in 2020 and was planned to be played out over an 11-year period ending in 2030. Notice also you have that number 11 in there, and I refer you to What the Flock TV, where Paul shows about the significance of the number 11, about it being connected with doorways. So that also ties into this as well. So check out his channel. Check out Archaic's channel if you don't know about the chronology or anything. Check out Old World Florida, the connections that are shown there, but across a whole perspective, from the etymology, the linguistics, the customs, the clothing, the place names, and much, much more. Also look at Karimo Ahu's channel. I'll put links into the description for all three of these channels, because between all these channels and many more, you do have the picture there and slightly different perspectives, but look for the common ground across these channels, and I feel that you'll start to see the picture. But yeah, I just thought this was very interesting, and there's a lot of gaslighting with things. There's a lot of things implied that can be done that are not done. There is a lot of theatre shows and the illusions of things. Take, for example, these deadly artificial insects and things that are supposed to be able to fire these deadly bullets. I'm sure some of you have seen, I think it was on was it a TED Talks or something, where they've got this dummy and this little insect and it just shoots a bullet straight through the head. Well, if that was true, why aren't we seeing evidence of that actually happening? A lot of these things seem to be put out there to cause and generate fear, and very easy to set things up if you've just got it on one stage, because this is a world stage and things are staged and played out in stages. But what is the truth of it? Where is the real evidence of it? It's difficult to even ascertain what is true and what is not, but certainly anything on the media would seem to be all contrived, all film shows, all theatre shows, with potentially added realism and a lot of deception, a lot of misattributing things, and playing one group off against another, of course. It's the usual tactics over and over again. Repeat patterns, repeat, repeat, repeat. That seems to be very much a theme of this reality. So, just as a final recap again, so you've got Atlantis with the concentric rings, you've got that layout in the world today. If the destruction was over a 20-year period, that will be more than sufficient time for enough people to think, hey, something's not going right here. It might be in our best interests we relocate and we salvage what we can from this civilization, because, again, if you have a vapor canopy, it acts like a magnifying glass. The stars and the constellations and everything would seem to be much closer. With the ability to read and see these things, that would give you time to prepare and to relocate, and I feel that is what happens. It's also talked in the Plato description about the 5 races of man all being there, all at one time living in harmony. So you can see also this dispersal. So this would probably explain why you have everything from the very dark-skinned, what we would call black-skinned people, to the brown, to the red, to the yellow, to the white. And they've all dispersed in different directions, those that have survived the destruction of Atlantis. And obviously we've had lots of shifting of populations and migrations, and of course the historic rewrites have just confused things even more. But the patterns do become predictable. So I'll leave those thoughts there with you, and next video, part 3, we'll come on to the etymology. So hopefully this has not been a video of doom and gloom, but but one that is just making sense of things. But as I said, it does not negate from doing that inner work. It has to start from within inside oneself first. If you want to create a new world, you want to create a balance, a harmony in this world, then it has to start within oneself first. Put that right first, oxygen mask on oneself first, so you are then able to go and assist others. That is probably the most important key to all of this. So right back full circle to where I started with talking about Lana. I recommend you go across to her channel and listen to the reading, the books that she's read, and given her personal insight, shown her authentic self on that. That will certainly help you a lot. Also, Neville Goddard, The Feeling is the Secret, is another good one to listen to. It's only an hour long, so it's not going to take up a lot of your time, but it's the effort you put inside yourself and doing that inner work which will determine how you navigate through this reality and what sort of reality you create for yourself. So I wish you all a beautiful new year, and the sun is shining, there is partly blue sky, and yeah, I feel this spring is going to be a fantastic one for many of us, and depending on what vibration you're on, the intensity of what you feel will be reflected on what you reflect out into this world. So love to you all, and have a beautiful, beautiful day.